The land panel comes on. And we have Amy Patterson from the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, Karen Bernaska from the Connecticut Fund for the Environment, and Eric Hammerling from Connecticut Forest and Park Association. And again, we're going to basically do 3 consecutive panels and then some conversation. You'll thank us at the end of the day for being tight through the day. And again, in case anyone came in, there's tons of material in your packet, lots of time for discussion at lunch, and thanks to Summit sponsors, Consumers for Sensible Energy, Valerie Friedman Fund, and the Summit Planning Committee. And I just want to have a 30-second rowdy applause for Lori and the League. Okay, thanks to our go for it.
So we'll take it away. Again, I'm Amy Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, which is the umbrella organization for Connecticut's land conservation community, working most particularly with the land trusts. So I have been asked to kick this off by talking about the status of land conservation in Connecticut. And when I was thinking about this last night, I was thinking, what would I entitle this? And I was thinking, what's new? Not much. So the status of land conservation in Connecticut, and I'm going to be looking down a bit because I have a lot of numbers in front of me, and they're important numbers, and that's why I'm going to talk about them. So under the Connecticut General Statutes, and it's section 23-8B, if you're interested, we have set a goal for conserving 21% of the state's land area. Of that, 10% of that should be conserved by the state of Connecticut, and 11% by partners, and that would consist of towns, water companies, and land trusts. The Green Plan, which is the state's comprehensive open space strategy, set the goal of conserving that 21% by the year 2023. So how are we doing? Not much new. According to DEEP's 2016 annual report, which is the most recent report that we've been working off of, and so the numbers have changed a little bit, but the state and the partners have conserved about 500,000 acres, which gets us about 75% of the way there, which sounds really pretty good until you get down in the weeds and you really start to look at those numbers. When I was preparing for this, I went back to my notes from the December 2015 summit, and I saw that I had referenced the most recent open space awards and the press release that had been issued by the governor's office stating that in awarding these grants to the partners, it got us 75% of the way there to reaching our goal, which is really where we are right now. The needle has not moved very much at all. And to put that in perspective for you, that in order to reach our goal of 21% by the year 2023, which is really now, let's just say it's unattainable, and everyone acknowledges that, DEEP would have to acquire over 8,900 acres a year, and in 2016 they only acquired 516. Partners, 15,000 acres a year, and in 2016, they acquired 2,200. And these numbers are not 100% accurate, but they're pretty close. So reaching 21% by 2023 is, again, clearly unattainable. And without significant investment into our land conservation programs, and we have them, we have to invest in them, we're never going to get there. And that's because when land is gone, it's gone forever. But here's what else is not new. The land conservation community is undeterred. They are moving forward, they are overcoming these challenges, and they are doing whatever it takes to get the land saved. And I'm not just talking about the towns and the land trusts and the water companies, although they are doing a tremendous amount of work, but I'm also talking about DEEP, and I'm talking about the federal government, that despite all of these challenges, every one of us as partners are moving forward to conserve land in our communities. So what do we do to help them? They want to do it, we want to help them, what do we do? And this is not new either. We need to continue to invest in the programs that we have. We have an open space and watershed land acquisition grant program, which has really been the backbone of the work of the partners. And that is a program funded through bonding, but bonding for that program has not been released since 2014. But it's also funded consistently through the Community Investment Act, which is, as most of you know, and if you don't know, you're not getting our information, that the Community Investment Act was established in 2005, and it It is funded through a surcharge at the local level on recording fees. The money goes up. It funds 4 programs: the Open Space Grant Program, Farmland Preservation, Affordable Housing Development, and Historic Properties Preservation. It has been wildly successful, but it also has been targeted year after year for rating to help offset budget deficits. So that program has got to be supported, and I will credit our legislators. They worked so hard in this past session to support the Community Investment Act, and it wasn't until the very, very end that $5 million was taken for the next 2 years out of that fund total, which is actually a victory compared to the previous 2 years where 50% had been cut for the 2 years, which really left the agency scrambling for some money. We also have 2 other programs, the Rec and Natural Heritage Trust Program, which is DEEP's source of funding. That program has been out of money, and DEEP has a list of properties where landowners would like to see their land conserved, but they have not been able to do that because they were out of money. That was recently funded by the Bond Commission, so hopefully DEEP will be able to then again move forward with all the work that they have been doing to try and conserve land. And finally, the Recreation Trails and Greenways Program, which Eric will talk about, but that also does fund some acquisition. Finally, here's something new, which is kind of nice to talk about, and that is, it's new and it's not. For years, we have been trying to get in place a municipal funding option that would enable but not require towns to establish an open space fund for stewardship and acquisition. It would be funded through a buyer's conveyance fee. It's, I don't know how many years through different iterations that bill has been tried and has not made it anywhere. This year, what we are trying to do is get a bill passed for the same purpose, but it would only include towns that want to be placed in the bill. It's enabling, even if those towns are in the bill, they don't have to do anything, but they're in there and they have the right to move forward and decide on a community by community basis if they want to establish that program. Previous iterations have been attempting to establish this statewide, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So we're really, really hoping that you can reach out to your local CEO, your mayor, your first selectman, and ask them if they'd be interested in presenting this option to their town. And if so, contact us, and we can work with their legislators to have that town named in the bill.
Okay,
there's more to talk
thank
about,
you.
but I'm done. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's hear it for creativity. Karen.
Thank you. Yes.
Breathless.
What an act to follow. Thank you very much. It's very good to be here. You've heard in the previous panel about the State Water Plan, and it is a living, breathing document that still has work to be done, but it lays the basis for balancing the use of water for all the various needs and for protecting water quantity and water quality, amongst other things. But there's one issue in the State Water Plan that will be the basis for what I'm going to say this morning, and that is protecting watershed land. It promotes the protection of watershed land. And protecting watershed land results not only in environmental benefits, but economic benefits and quality of life benefits. Oh, move. Is this better? Don't want to say, but protecting watershed land, that is what I'm here to talk about this morning. And protecting watershed land not only has environmental benefits to people, but it has economic and it has quality of life. This same sentiment, and Amy mentioned the Green Plan, was included in the DEEP's Green Plan that was released this year, because the plan includes as one of its 4 major priorities the acquisition of land that will protect our natural waters and drinking water resources. So you've heard that not much has been done, but with this being said, and people might ask the question, if land experts and stakeholders and water experts and stakeholders all believe that it's important to protect watershed land, what's the problem? You know, why am I here talking about it? Well, the Green Plan also states that Connecticut has witnessed a rapid growth in developed land compared to the rate of population growth over the last 40 years. We've seen a lot of land developed. At the same time, there's been a slow growth in population, and many people might refer to that land development pattern as sprawl. The Green Plan also states that between 1985 and 2010, the state lost 115,200 acres of forest land. This fact, along with the high rate of development, is important because developed land can't provide the same, and they call it sustaining ecosystem services that natural lands do. Developed land and watershed land doesn't protect and can often harm our drinking water sources. It is a widely accepted fact that source water protection through land protection of the watershed land is a cornerstone of the multi-barrier approach to safe drinking water. This multi-barrier approach is needed to protect drinking water from contaminants. Protecting the land helps ensure that the water will not be threatened by pollution from roads, sewers, or urban runoff. And these core forest areas, of which the Green Plan says we've already lost 100,000 acres, is known to help and promote water infiltration. This watershed land protection that not only protects our water quality, it is an investment that pays off through reduced water treatment rates. One figure from a Trust for Public Land report states that for every 10% increase in forest cover in source water area, treatment and chemical costs decrease by approximately 20%. So this protection of water and the reduction in treatment cost helps now, but it also helps provide a safe water supply for generations to come. Let me just give you a few statistics, and I'm going to read these also, and they come from the Green Plan. The Green Plan states that there are over 550,000 acres of watershed land in Connecticut. Of this number, about a third is owned by water companies, the state, and/or municipalities. Approximately 20% of the watershed land is already developed, and that leaves 47% privately owned and undeveloped. Some of this undeveloped watershed land is currently available for development, and land around reservoirs and water bodies is particularly attractive to developers. There's a sheet in your packet from Connecticut Fund for the Environment that lists, and you can get an idea where the drinking water watersheds are. The Green Plan also is in a positive note, and all the acreage that if it wants to preserve, and it would like to, in the next 5 years, it would like to preserve 1,500 acres of watershed land, and have municipalities and land trusts and other partners acquire 3,500 acres. And this is the land around reservoirs, streams, groundwater sources, and that's a really good thing if it would happen. The preservation of watershed land protects our water sources and our natural resources, and both of those things are essential to the health and the quality of life in our state. To me, the watershed land protection is a no-brainer, but there is a catch. We have to be continually vigilant about what's going on. If you have a chance, if you have the opportunity to look in your packet, there is a handout from Protect Our Watershed Connecticut. This group was formed in 2016 to protect and preserve drinking water for all Connecticut residents, and has focused critical attention on the legislation that would exempt the city of New Britain from current environmental laws protecting Class 1 and Class 2 watershed land by allowing the city of New Britain to lease over 130 acres of New Britain Water Company land to Tilcon, a private company, for the purpose of extracting stone and other materials. Thanks to the effort of this group, other residents, environmental groups who lobbied and sent information to legislators, this legislation was changed to require the city to commission a study on the environmental impacts of this proposed change in use. That would allow a mining operation. The end result of this change of use would be, within 40 to 50 years, a water reservoir on the quarry site. And the results of the study are due out next week and will be reviewed by the Council on Environmental Quality, the Water Planning Council, the Watershed Land Group, which we know, and many advocates. And by the way, if you're not aware, Connecticut has some of the strongest protections for the forests and land that surround drinking water watersheds, watershed areas and water reservoirs that help filter the water, and that's the way we want to keep it. If this change, can I just say one? I just would like to point out someone. If this change has occurred, it will have a long-lasting effect on New Britain, its residents, the area. And Paul Zagorski is here in the audience. He is the one of the founding members of Protect the Watershed Group, and he will be around through lunch to answer any questions you may have.
Sweet, thank you. Eric. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
Good, thank you, Eric.
So my name is Eric Hammerling. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. And when I think about land conservation, I tend to think about it in three different buckets. One is you need to have enough funding to acquire lands. Another is you need to have the resources to manage those lands. And then in particular, when you're thinking about public lands and Class 1 and 2 watershed lands, you need to have a process that ensures that those lands are safe and aren't given away. So I'll be talking about two issues in the resources to manage lands category, and one in trying to protect those lands from being given away. One of those programs that's really important, but right now is out of funding, is the state's Connecticut Recreational Trails and Greenways program. Now, many of you know that when you go outdoors and want to experience all the amazing diversity that we have in Connecticut, one of the best ways to do that is on trails. And Connecticut, for many years, has been a leader in trails. In fact, for those of you who every June, the first weekend in June, participate in Connecticut Trails Day, you'll be proud to know that there are more Trails Day events that happen in Connecticut than any other state in the nation. Why is that? Because we have so many land trusts, so many watershed groups, so many advocates who love land, municipalities who understand how important those lands are to public health and recreation. And in fact, the Outdoor Recreation and Industry Association did a recent study on the economic benefits of those lands, and I'll just read that very quickly. Outdoor recreation generates $6.9 billion in Connecticut in consumer spending, $2.2 billion in wages and salaries in the private sector, $502 million in state and local tax revenues, and supports 71,000 Connecticut jobs. So it is really important to ensure that there's a program like Recreational Trails and Greenways to support all of that economic activity, all of the public health that comes from using trails. And to add just one last thing on that, every 5 years, Connecticut does this really important report called SCORP. It's the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. The number one activity that people in Connecticut participate in is walking on trails. So we need to have a program that supports that. I also want to thank the legislators who are here today, particularly those who took a great interest this last session in making sure there is a passport to parks. Those of you who've heard of the Passport to Parks know that it's a program that took effect, January this year, to actually allow all of us to get into parks for free. In return, we all will be contributing to this program through our vehicle registration. It's a $10 fee that we all pay every other year, but that generates enough resources to help parks be maintained. And in fact, those campgrounds that have been closed for the last 2 years should be able to be reopened. And I'd imagine that Commissioner Klee will talk some more about this. But again, thanks to the legislators who helped make sure there is a passport to parks and ongoing support for our state jewels. And then lastly, I want to talk about this really important issue that many people don't know about, and that is your state parks and forests and wildlife management areas, for the most part, are not actually protected. Now, you might look at me a little bit strangely and say, wait a second, it's a state park, it's a state forest, how can it not be protected? Well, every year, there's a process in the General Assembly known as the Conveyance Act. In the Conveyance Act, legislators have the ability to nominate different state lands to be sold, swapped, or given away. Many of you are familiar with the Haddam land swap, which was one of the ways that that issue really came to great public attention. But of course, for many years, this has been done. I would say that in the Conveyance Act that happens every year, probably 3/4 of the things in the Conveyance Act are not controversial. But for that 1/4 of public lands, valuable public lands that are proposed to be given away, that is something that we're very concerned about. And what we're most concerned about is that the current process has kind of two steps. One is there's a public hearing. However, it is fairly regular that after a public hearing, there are additional things added to the conveyance bill, additional public lands that are given away, and there's no opportunity for public input. So there's a bill that was passed in 2016 that would amend the state constitution if it's passed again and gets on the ballot this November, which would essentially require three things. It would require a public hearing before public lands could be given away, a 2/3 vote in each chamber before lands could be given away, and individual bills for those lands that are being proposed to be given away, which is something that has been a process issue in the past. When you have an omnibus bill with all these things together, as I mentioned, many of them non-controversial, those carry along the controversial proposals along with them if we're not careful. So I will stop there, and we look forward to your questions.
All right, awesome, thank you. Okay, and let's, what is your opinion regarding the use of open space land for green energy?
Go for it, Amy.
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I don't know why they're looking at me, but okay. So it's a very good question because obviously this is a land conservation panel, but we also support renewable energy. We want to see that be a part of the state's energy mix. And the thing that is most concerning to me, and I won't speak for my co-panelists, is when we have incentives for renewable energy that actually promote the loss of forest land, agricultural land, more than other types of lands that we're trying to protect on the land conservation side. There are a lot of new ideas that are always coming up in this area about both renewable energy technologies that are less intensive on the land and can be compatible with land conservation. And I think the legislature, tried to find that middle ground this last year in some legislation that makes sure that the Siting Council is taking into consideration core forest land and agricultural land before permitting renewable energy projects. So it's a balancing act, but one that I think will eventually find the right balance.
Thank you. Is there a large-scale plan for connectivity of natural areas? And if not, is there something in the works?
I would say that when you say a large-scale plan, certainly we are moving towards a lot of regional work. We have regional conservation partnerships throughout the state now that are working with the land trusts within their communities and the communities themselves in terms of getting the mapping done, and then looking at the ways that the natural resources can be connected within the region. It's really interesting to go through the exercise of looking at one of those maps and then removing the data layer that shows the town boundaries, and then all you see is the connectivity. And I think that we are definitely moving in the right direction when it comes to that effort. And I think, as Eric alluded to, one of the ways that we can really support that is to support the state program through DEEP to help with greenways and recreational trails, because that's a very obvious way that we can promote connectivity with public access.
Great. And then follow-up question, are there opportunities for towns to collaborate in conservation? For example, a city paying a rural town to conserve more land?
Can you repeat that question?
Imagine that.
Are there
right?
opportunities for intermunicipal collaboration? And the example was given, a city wants to see land conservation but doesn't really have it within its boundaries, paying a rural community and some kind of credit mechanism.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know of that many incentives that are there other than limited budgets, reality, the fact that there are resources that can be used more efficiently on a regional basis, likely, and we are seeing in those communities where it makes sense to find innovative ways to partner. Those partnerships are starting to happen, but then again, we're in Connecticut. This is a home rule state. Every town tends to think about itself somewhat individually, and it's though it is important for us to be thinking broader. I wish we had something known as counties in Connecticut. I think that's a direction we need to move in. but it's not where we are right now.
And I would just add again, just to follow up on my previous response, that the Regional Conservation Partnership Network that's really developing is helping to foster those opportunities for towns to be in the same room together. CLCC offers these summits, and land trusts and towns just come and talk to each other. And it's been very helpful because they're seeing more commonalities than not, and are, especially in light of limited resources, are really seeing the efficiencies of working together. So I think we are moving in the right direction that way, and I look forward to coming back in a couple of years and reporting on where we're at. And we probably will have fewer land trusts, which is not a bad thing. It's probably a good thing because a lot of these smaller land trusts are looking at ways of working together to be more effective in the long term.
And I should have added, too, that there are some regional conservation partnerships that have kind of sprung up around the state around different habitats and opportunities to look at things on a broader basis. And I think those are helping to imprint the opportunities to think broader, and that's a good thing.
Great. And then last question, TILCON, anybody want to make any predictions? A simple no will suffice.
I think that I think when people look at this whole proposal, when you are taking, the bottom line is, what is the actual benefit for water and to not only the residents of the city and surrounding communities over the long run. And I think that when this TILCON report comes out, it will be scrutinized. It will be scrutinized not only by public agencies, but by the legislators. The legislature had turned down a proposal similar to this in 2007, and my hope is that that the same will be turned down again. For what we have seen and what we have heard, we have not seen the long-term benefits of this, only the detrimental effects to the community, but we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you. All right, thank you, land panel. So the land panel scoots, and the next presenters, thank you very much, great job.